Hi listeners, welcome to another episode of Melting Pot, a series of conversations with very diverse and extremely passionate people who are also, in my opinion, change makers, and they come from all walks of life and from all over the world. My guest today is Sam Allen. Sam is an arts engagement specialist, and she's also the founder of The Creative Social, which is an enterprise based in Singapore. Currently, Sam lives in London, and we'll hear her tell us her journey and her travels and her everything that she'd like to share with you, my listeners. So thank you, Sam, for talking to me on Melting Pot today. And I know it's a bit early for you where you are, but I do appreciate you starting your day with me. So again...
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So yes, what's your story, Sam? You are from the UK, but are you originally from the UK?
Yes, I am. So I'm originally from southeast England, from Kent, but both of my parents are from other countries. So my father was from the West Indies in the Caribbean, from a British island, which meant that, an ex-colony. So that meant that he came to settle here with his family in his teenage years. And my mother's from Melbourne in Australia. And she came backpacking to the UK when she was about 24 and eventually met my father and decided to stay. So they have three girls. I'm number two. So yes, I come from mixed heritage, which is very much part of who I am and the work I do. And I think what sort of interests me and drives me, especially now in the work I'm doing. I've also lived in lots of different places around the world, possibly because I come from parents who have always loved travel, who love culture, food. They're very excited by people from different cultures. So I've travelled a lot. I've lived in lots of different countries. Most recently, I lived in Singapore for 7 years, which I absolutely loved. Prior to that, I was living in Portugal. I've also travelled around the world several times. I've lived in Australia a couple of times. So yes, and I'm now back in London at the moment, which has been a very interesting year. Obviously, 2020's had a lot of challenges, but it's been a very exciting year as well. So that's where I am at the moment.
Okay. And you call yourself an arts engagement specialist. So for
Yes.
people who don't really understand what that is, I'd love you to talk about that.
Well, my work as an arts engagement specialist sort of started, so it's around obviously the arts. I guess what I would say is this is quite a new area. Some people call it sort of, like audience participation, audience development, interpretation. There's lots of different phrases that are used in sort of museums and art galleries. I guess what I would say is that I sit between cultural organisations, museums, heritage spaces and the audience. So in Singapore, I helped people understand, connect and engage with art in very different ways in those spaces. So that might be working with a cultural organisation on their programming, to enliven it, to deepen it, to enrich it, to be more kind of audience focused rather than curatorial sort of focus, curatorially led. That also extends to my own work. I used to do a lot of curated gallery tours where I would take people with me on a journey. I tend to focus on identity. So looking at things through the lens of identity, which might be gender, it could be culture, it could be your beliefs, your held systems, and trying to help people understand what they're seeing. So even if you don't like something, trying to figure out why you don't like it, or if you really respond to something, why that is. I also do things like facilitate panel discussions. That's another way of, engaging people, trying to ask better questions, different questions, deeper questions about things. I run a lot of workshops. I write a lot of arts educational programs as well. So these are other forms of engagement. yeah, I do a lot of sort of facilitation of people's understanding and learning of art. And that comes out in lots of different ways. I also do some arts journalism. I have been a media partner with, large companies, one-to-one collaborations, just trying to help people sort of really tease out the truth and the depth and the meaning behind something, and then helping the audience personalize that for them so they walk away really understanding something or being able to connect with it, even if that's a negative connection. Because I guess through my work as an educator, I loved those light bulb moments when you could see that somebody was really getting something and really understanding something. And I realised that was something that I could do in the art world. And I think, so many people spend their lives around art and sort of, but don't really understand it and don't really sort of feel that it's for them, whereas actually art is supposed to be a reflection of society. It's a critique of society. So it is about us. It's about all of us. And I think when you have those connections with art, which I have always felt, possibly because my mother was an artist and we were always in galleries when we were children, I want other people to feel that. I want people to understand what art can do for them, how it can make you think about your own life, how you can feel so connected and drawn to something, how it can make you curious about something and go away and research it, or, the way it can just make you feel understood or happy or, I don't know, angry about something and want to sort of, take action in some way to sort of improve something or to help in some way. And I think that's so powerful. So that's really what my arts engagement work is at the moment. But it's something that it's definitely a developmental area. Definitely with the people I'm connected with around the world on LinkedIn, etc., who work in different cultural spaces. People interpret that in different ways, and it's still really quite a relatively new area to work in.
Okay, and is that what prompted you or kind of headed you in the direction of setting up Creative Social in Singapore?
Creative Art Social.
Creative Arts Social, yeah.
Yeah, it did actually. I saw, when I moved to Singapore, I saw a very clear gap in the market. I saw a niche. And I don't necessarily think I wasn't looking for an opportunity, but it was a frustration. And it began as a frustration that, when I moved to Singapore in 2012, there was so much money being put into the arts.
Sam, what was the reason for you to move to Singapore? Was it because you wanted to experience Asia? Why Singapore?
Well, I'd actually travelled a lot in Asia before and loved it. And I guess I was looking to live somewhere in Asia, and actually, rather than just sort of travel through as a backpacker, which is wonderful, I actually wanted to stop somewhere for a while. So that's how I ended up in Singapore. The right opportunity came up in education. And when I got there, my job allowed me to pursue something else as well. And yeah, I saw a gap in the market. There was a lot of top-down activity. So lots of art schools, lots of new spaces opening up. But I just noticed that there was no bottom-up action. So, so many people in Singapore, particularly sort of local people who'd had a very sort of STEM-based education system based on science, mathematics, etc., but not really sort of arts and creativity, were interested in exploring art but didn't really know where to start. And I saw that as a frustration at first, and then I saw that as an opportunity. And I started running arts events, initially just taking people to existing events that were happening. Because, so many people said, God, how do you know this is going on? This is fantastic. I've lived here my whole life. And I just thought, well, I'm inquisitive. I look for things in unusual spaces, perhaps. I don't know. And then after a while, there was a huge amount of different sort of groups, art groups, a few years later, that was sort of emerging. And I thought, well, what's different about yours? And I realised that the people who were coming to my groups were saying, gosh, we learned so much about art from you. And, your group's quite different from other people's. And, there was a lot more learning, in a fun way, but there was a lot more, they would get a lot more out of my groups rather than, and then I started running, my own groups and workshops and gallery tours, and I started partnering up with, you know, galleries, you know, they were very happy of having the footfall, and they would also, you know, the gallery owners or the people working in the galleries, you know, loved having a group of people who were very interested in what they were doing, you know, and they'd sort of give us talks and things like this, you know, and I think also I realised that the art community had always been, you know, the true art community in Singapore had probably felt quite sort of small and sidelined. And I think people who were interested in learning more about art and being around creative people didn't have a social group as well. So that's how it emerged. And, you know, it's so wonderful. You know, I left Singapore in 2019, and, you know, it was such a different place. You know, there's so many people who are interested in art. There's so many, you know, young people, older people as well, who are really curious about what they're seeing, who are really developing a taste for, you know, different types of art, who are so much more curious about what's out there. And I think there's more of an ownership of their sort of creativity, whereas before it felt like people were sort of waiting for somebody else to
bring it,
help them learn and help them
help them
understand.
learn.
I guess that was my opportunity.
Yeah. So London again is so, it's just incredible, the amount of art galleries and museums and culture it's so rich. Singapore, it's not fair to compare because Singapore is so much smaller, but the 7 years that you were here, you did mention that things have changed on a smaller scale, but how would you compare London with Singapore with London in that space?
I think there are wonderful opportunities in both. I think for me, by the time I left, you know, I formed some incredible relationships. I was media partnering with all the big arts events in arts festivals and things in Singapore. You know, I felt like I was doing really good work, you know, meaningful work. When I say good work, I mean meaningful work. And I was enjoying that. But at the time, I felt like I needed more of a challenge. And I think, you know, Singapore is, the Singapore art scene is full of opportunity. I think that's a wonderful thing because it's quite a green space. So, you know, and when you come to London, you don't get that opportunity in the same way. You know, there's a huge amount to soak up here, you know, in a very sort of deep level. And you know, I remember
it's matured, right?
It's mature, but then with that maturity, you get the elitism, you get the sort of get to the back of the queue. You know, everyone thinks they're important in the art world, you know, and again, opportunity is not the same here. It's much more difficult. It's not impossible at all, and I've loved some of the work, most of the work I've done here, and it's quite different from Singapore. I think another thing that I noticed initially was, you know, I think in Singapore people still create within the boundaries or the limitations of censorship, and, you know, here people don't. Well, I mean, there is censorship in some ways, you know, and definitely in the sort of the racial activism work I've been doing recently, you know, there's a lot of limitations, there's a lot of oppression of voices and, you know, different groups of people in England. So the challenge is quite different. But I think what I initially noticed here is that public conversations were so much more open, you know, so public art conversations was so much more open. And rather than, I think in Singapore, I'd often find that you know, the right things were highlighted, but they were never really resolved publicly. Whereas here, conversations are pushed, you know, opinions are really, you know, people offer their true opinion in a public space. There's a lot of dissent, which I love. And, you know, I find that conversations go further and deeper. But that doesn't mean to say there aren't problems here. There's, you know, with people being able to express themselves, you know, minority groups, you know, quieter voices are still, you know, seeking that amplification here. So there's a huge amount of work to be done. But yeah, I think there's more of a what would I say, more of an identity here in art. Whereas in Singapore, I still think Singapore's trying to find its artistic identity, you know, through sometimes through the influences of other parts of Asia, etc. They're still trying to find their identity, whereas there's much more of a confidence in and a development in a lot of the art that you see here. But it's a completely different, it's a completely different ball game. We've had hundreds and thousands of years of artistic influence, as have a lot of parts of Asia, and Singapore's a very, young country that's still itself out. So it's not, it's not a bad thing. It's not a criticism. It's just an observation of, countries being in different spaces. I mean, we have a huge amount of problems over here, not just with COVID, but with Brexit. And, there's a massive funding crisis over here now for the arts. So, that's changing a lot of things as well, changing how people are doing things. I think, again, I choose to see that as an exciting time, which is going to force some changes that need to happen. But yeah, there's a lot of difficulties and challenges here as well.
You're listening to a fusion of stories recounted for the first time ever by some fascinating people from across the globe with me, Payo, on this very unique and special podcast series, Melting Pot.
Yeah, and in Singapore, I think it's arts spaces as well as arts in general are getting a lot of, or is getting a lot of support, financial, with grants and funding and all of that. Really, it is at that stage where, Singapore wants it to become a more mature area of development. So I think, so in that sense, a lot of work is being done.
Definitely. It's very, it's very exciting. And like I said, in such a small space of time when I lived in Singapore, I mean, 7 years is a long time, but it's a very short time. The development there, and when I say development, I really sort of mean the development of sort of creative thinking, critical thinking, those sorts of elements that are really important was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. So that was very exciting to be a part of that, massively exciting.
Yeah.
And I think in a small place you can feel you can feel what your influence has been, as well as the influence of others around you, who are working in that space. It's incredibly exciting. Whereas I think in London, you're this tiny little fish in an incredibly big pond, so it's completely different. But both have been wonderful experiences for me.
Yeah, and very, very distinctive experiences, which
and enriching,
very so enriching. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was going to say. So, is creative arts social still around in Singapore?
Not in the same way. My blog is still alive, just about, and my social media. But at the moment, I'm in a period of sort of change as regards creative arts social and the direction it's going in. So that's actually something I'm working on in Lockdown 2.0 in London, because I think again, from the work and the experiences I've had since I've been back in London, I'm on a journey. We're all on a journey, and I'm a lifelong learner. So I love that. That journey of learning and experience and sort of reflection and evaluation. And I think the work that I'm very interested in doing more of at the moment is still around identity. I'm just about to embark on a project around mixed heritage. I'm of mixed heritage, and how mixed heritage is represented in art. People often talk about, people from minority backgrounds. There's been that huge Black Lives Matter movement here and all around the world this year, which has been sort of, it's been very powerful. It's been very challenging as well. But, I'm very keen to explore mixed race heritage in art, because, when you're of mixed race, you belong everywhere and don't belong anywhere. You're part of different cultures, and I think sometimes you fit in very well in different cultures because of that. But I think also you sort of have this inbuilt diplomacy that perhaps people from one culture don't really have. I'm a very inclusive person. I try to bridge gaps. I try to form relationships. I try to help other people do that. I think you have this sort of inbuilt diplomacy. I think it's really interesting how we also have been sort of forgotten, in art. Mixed race, people of mixed heritage are the largest growing group in Britain. So where are we? Where's our representation in an art gallery? And people of mixed heritage you can't sort of put us in a box in the same way, although of course we are characterised as people of colour are in this country and around the world by the use of acronyms like BAME, for example, Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnic, which, it does not represent us properly. So I'm very interested in looking at that. I'm also doing a lot of work around anti-racism in the arts and heritage sector, something that emerged from the Black Lives Matter movement this year, and the fact that institutional racism is rife. Lack of opportunity for people of colour, in senior positions, for example, is one thing, but also in the very sort of reductive ways that people are represented in museums. I've also been doing a lot of work around decolonisation. I was very lucky during this year to do work with an incredible association called Culturand, who do a lot of work around authentic decolonisation. And, I've also worked in, large spaces like the Tate Modern as well this year, which was also a phenomenal experience. And just sort of looking at the vastness of some of these arts institutions and understanding how culture is formed within institutions. So I'm really interested in working in that area. So also sort of engagement within organisations as well as with the audience outside. So yes, Creative Art Social is still alive and kicking. It's getting a little refresh at the moment. And, I will continue to try to engage, try to provoke, I think, and try to make a difference in the industry. I think that's something that's really become clear for me this year, and it was clear through my work in Singapore. I don't want to work in a beautiful gallery sitting behind a desk, looking at depictions of war, on the walls. I want to be changing something. I want to be helping people, really learn about what's going on around the world. I want to help people learn about themselves. I want to improve the conditions and of the people working in arts and cultural heritage spaces as well. There's a phenomenal amount of knowledge and experience within the marginalised communities that is just not tapped into in England at all. I'm on an executive committee for a wonderful group called Museum Detox here that is for people of colour who work in arts and heritage spaces. And, there's a wealth of knowledge from different marginalised communities here that, it's just not tapped into in art spaces. And, I want to be working there. I want to be changing that. I'm somebody who wants to change the way that things are doing for the better. So that's what Creative Art Social is going to be doing in the future. So I hope to still work with audiences, but I think I will be working also very much with organisations, small organisations, large organisations, around racial activism, around decolonisation, around representation for people of colour in arts and heritage spaces, and really sort of, again, things that I've realised are so important to me as a person and a part of my identity, really exploring things like belonging and how we belong, and cultural spaces are supposed to be places that we do belong, that we see ourselves. And I think people of colour in the UK don't see themselves in those spaces, and they should. We all pay taxes as well, and we should be understood. We're part of the heritage of this country, and we're part of the national identity, and that's not always obvious. So that's really what is occupying me at the moment. And again, that work's going to expand. I'm on a journey with what I've been doing there, and it's something that I feel I can really help to make positive change in those areas. And I think I've realised that I am an activist. I'm somebody who needs to change. I don't accept the status quo. I don't, I like to question. I like to look at gaps. I like to look at what people don't say rather than what they do. I'm less about words and more about actions. And I've realised that through my career, and so I have to be on, I have to be changing things. I have to be doing things that have meaning. I can't be sitting behind a beautiful desk in a beautiful gallery, filing my nails.
Yeah, no, wow, that's incredible. I mean, I've just been riveted listening to you. And yeah, I think you're on a mission, and I'm sure it may take a little time, but listening to the passion in your voice, I think you will get to what you've set yourself out to do. It's a huge task because it's changing mindsets. It's getting people to start to think differently, and it's also
and to think inclusively.
Think inclusively, yes, and dig deeper.
And dig deeper for yourself.
Yes,
but. Yeah, and also I think to include sort of people's lived experience. Listen to people, talk to the people around you. And I try to do that, I think, in my own life. But I think we can always do that better. Listen, watch, listen. Don't feel like you know everything, because none of us do. I can't speak for really anyone else of mixed heritage, because I'm only myself. But I can try and listen to other people. I can try to see commonalities in our stories. I can listen to people from different backgrounds from me. I have lots of friends from all over the world, and we all have different experiences. And I think, I'm only one person with some big dreams, but I think we can all carve a little path out and hope that we're doing something that matters.
Yeah, and you can, through your ideas, and you can start building a community of people who think like you and get onto the same platform. And I'm curious to see how this, the path that you have chosen for yourself. I'd love to see how the direction that it takes. And
thank you very much. I mean, I'm excited about that, and I think you just have to move forward with when you have ideas and you have passions, you have to move forward. We're in a huge state of flux around the world at the moment. Let's see how that morphs. But I think the path becomes clear. You take a step, and then the next step appears.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And that's where I am at the moment. And I think my passion at the moment is a culmination of who I am, what I believe in, what frustrates me in the world, and it's and I don't know, possibly sort of ideals of of better spaces, better lives, and better ways of doing things. And I think it's a culmination of all of that, that drives any of us forward, really. And hopefully some positive change will come.
Wow, fantastic. So continue to talk to you, but I guess I have to cap the chat somewhere.
Sure.
And I've really enjoyed listening to you, Sam, and I wish you all the very best. And
thank you so much, and to you in this wonderful series that you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Again, you're a very curious person who's journeying with other people that you're meeting along the way, to help other people explore and understand what's happening in the world and different experiences. So I'm very happy to talk to you as well.
Thank you very much. Bye for now, and we'll speak again soon.
All the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
It was fascinating listening to Sam's experiences and her passion to give back through all her creative engagement projects. I think is quite remarkable. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Until the next week, this is Payal signing off.